The dive bar wasn't just forgotten by the galaxy, it had been actively erased. It didn't show up on star maps, it didn't transmit advertisements, and the name above the door was missing half its letters. Locals called it the Burn because of the scorch mark across its front wall and the way the drinks felt like jet fuel on the way down. It was the kind of place you stumbled into when you were running from something, or running out of options. Jack Rivers wasn't running, not anymore. He was stuck. After his last cargo job went sour, which involved a collapsed smuggling deal, one ruptured spleen and a 6-week recovery on borrowed morphine, he'd limped his way here and taken up bartending. It didn't pay well. It didn't pay at all, really, unless you counted the bar's tendency to forget what was owed on rent, but it was quiet. That counted for something. Until that night. The first sign something was off was the silence. Not the usual lull between drunken arguments or tired music, but the thick, electrified hush of fear. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Even the jukebox glitched and went mute. Jack looked up from polishing a glass to see what had stunned the room. The warlord stood just inside the entrance, stooping to clear the scorched doorway. 8 feet tall, clad in oxidized armor that shimmered with embedded plasma scars. His eyes glowed faintly under the ridged helm, and his presence seemed to hum like a ship's core reactor. The air smelled faintly of ionized metal and fear. No one moved. No one dared. Except Jack. He glanced at the warlord, then back at the grime-streaked glass in his hand. "You want something to drink, or are you here to redecorate?" The silence thickened into pure horror. The warlord walked forward, each step thudding against the old floor like distant thunder. He reached the bar, stopped, and stared directly at Jack. "You serve?" Jack nodded once. "Liquor, mostly. Food if you hate your organs." The warlord tilted his head. "You are not afraid?" "Oh, I'm terrified," Jack said, reaching under the counter, not for a weapon, but a bottle. "But I learned a while back that fear doesn't mix well with customer service." "What'll it be?" The warlord's eyes flickered. "Surprise me." Jack poured something greenish and bubbling into a cracked glass, set it in front of the towering figure, and leaned on the bar. "That'll either give you a buzz or dissolve your armor." The warlord drank it in a single swallow. "It burns." Jack gave a tired nod. "The Burn lives up to the name." A pause stretched between them. Then the warlord pulled out a holoprojector and slammed it on the bar. A map of the galaxy blinked into existence, displaying fleets, routes, and systems under siege. "This is my next campaign." The room was still silent. Every patron was pretending not to breathe. Jack didn't even look around. He took one long look at the projection. Then he leaned forward, furrowed his brow, and pointed with the tip of a stirring straw. "This plan," he said, voice casual, "is stupid." Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. Even the jukebox buzzed in shock. Jack didn't stop. "You're pushing your heavy carriers straight into a choke point, betting the enemy won't collapse it behind you. You're spreading your supply chain thin across 6 unstable systems and hoping none of them rebel or collapse. And this," he tapped a blinking red dot, "this whole decoy flank thing, it's loud, too loud. Anyone with ears will see it coming 3 sectors away. It's doomed to fail." The warlord stared at him. The tension in the room felt like a storm about to split the ceiling. Then the warlord laughed. A deep, guttural sound that rumbled like a fusion engine spun too fast. "You insult me. You insult my strategy." Jack nodded, pouring himself a glass of water. His hand didn't shake. "Yeah, I thought that was clear. And you offer no better plan?" "I'd start by not treating logistics like a game of drunken darts. Maybe centralize command on something that isn't a glorified weapons platform with no fallback. And I wouldn't rely on fear to keep border systems in line. Fear's brittle. Break it once, it turns on you." The warlord fell silent. Then he downed a second glass of green liquor, and for the first time Jack saw it, a flicker of genuine thought behind the glowing eyes. Not anger, not ego, just Curiosity. What is your name? Jack. Jack? You will no longer serve drinks, you will serve me. Jack blinked. You want a bartender as what? A consultant? The warlord leaned in. An advisor. I have feared too long. I need honesty. I need someone who will tell me when my strategies are stupid. You will speak freely. You will not lie. And if you die, I will avenge you personally. Jack stared at him. You pain? Yes. Health insurance? I own 3 hospitals. Jack drained his glass, set it down, and said, Guess I quit. The next morning, Jack boarded the warlord's dreadnought cruiser. He was given a chamber, a uniform, and a datapad filled with military briefings. He read through 3 of them before deciding that yes, these people definitely needed help. That afternoon, he attended a strategy session with the warlord's inner circle. 12 alien commanders, each more adorned and heavily armed than the last, gathered around a massive galactic map. Jack stood at the edge, sipping coffee. One of the commanders scoffed. Why is the human present? Because, the warlord growled, he sees the cracks you are too proud to admit. Jack raised his cup. Cheers. The next 3 days were chaos. Jack upended fleet deployments, cut supply routes in half, and rerouted 3 major offensives away from resource sinks. He argued with a 4-armed tactician for 6 hours about orbital drop points, and ended up in medbay with a minor concussion after tripping over a command cable. The scans were clear, no fracture, but he had to rest for 2 days, per med protocol. He was still groggy when he returned, sipping electrolyte fluid and grimacing at every bright screen, but the warlord nodded in approval. You did not quit. I was concussed, not dead. And you returned to argue again. You're still planning to bombard an agricultural moon without evacuating the workforce. That's not war, it's stupidity. The warlord barked a laugh. It went on like this for weeks. Jack survived food poisonings, a navigation mishap that nearly dumped him in open space, and a shuttle crash landing during a planetary inspection that left him with 3 cracked ribs. This time, he knew the pain wasn't just bruising. Med scans confirmed it. No internal bleeding, but he was wrapped and grounded for 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were mostly spent in a recliner, pointing at strategy hollows with a stylus and sipping pain meds through a straw. The warlord visited him daily, sitting beside him like a stone statue. You are fragile, the warlord said once. Human bones don't take well to gravity-assisted crashes. But your mind remains sharp. That's the part you hired, remember? The warlord nodded. Perhaps the rest can be replaced. Try it, and I'll teach your replacement to insult your ship design. The warlord laughed again. By the end of the first month, the warlord's campaigns had shifted entirely. Less fear, more precision. Strategic treaties replaced showy invasions. Refugees from failed systems were resettled instead of enslaved. And in hushed corners of the galaxy, a new kind of legend grew. Not of a warlord's brutality, but of a human who dared to call a death fleet loud and doomed, and lived to become its compass. Jack didn't smile often, but when he did, it usually came after telling someone their brilliant idea was idiotic. He was good at that. 3 months in, Jack had adjusted to his new reality, which mostly meant he stopped flinching when doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, or when alien lieutenants shouted in tones that could peel paint. The bruised ribs had mostly healed. He still moved carefully, though, wary of sudden bends or deep breaths. The med staff checked him weekly, scolding him when he skipped his stretches. He hated the stretches, did the rhythm. Mornings started with briefing reviews, followed by arguing with tactical AI that didn't understand why burn everything wasn't a viable fallback plan. Afternoons were meetings, endless meetings. Every admiral wanted Jack's eyes on their campaigns now, but none of them liked hearing what he had to say. Your plan assumes the enemy doesn't respond to basic survival instincts, Jack told a feathered commander who had twice his medals and none of his patience. You're fighting farmers with orbital cannons. Do you want food riots across 3 systems? They will kneel. They'll starve. then riot, then defect. If you want them quiet, keep them fed and give them something to lose. The warlord, seated silently beside him, let the room fall quiet before gesturing to Jack. We listen. Grudgingly, they did. Jack's words carried weight now. He was still blunt, still scruffy around the edges, still mostly confused by half the alien etiquette customs he was supposed to memorize. But the campaigns were winning. Not just battles, territories, resources. Then came the assassination attempt. Jack had just finished chewing out an envoy over a trade blockade when he stepped back into his quarters and felt that too clean silence. No ventilation. Hum. No blinking console lights. His instincts flared. He reached for the emergency call pad just as something lunged from the shadows. He didn't scream. He fell hard, shoulder smashing into the floor, his arm caught under the weight of something heavy and cold. There was a blur of motion, a hiss, and pain sliced through his left thigh. He shouted, kicking blindly. The thing, whatever it was, tumbled back, chittering in a high, wet tone. Jack crawled, dragging his leg, pain blooming white-hot. He hit the emergency beacon with his elbow just before the assassin pounced again. Security arrived in under 30 seconds. It took them another 10 to kill the thing, a spindly insectoid merc laced with black market implants and venom sacs. When the med team arrived, Jack was semi-conscious and bleeding heavily. The blade had torn through muscle and grazed the femoral artery. He was stabilized on site, then rushed to the ship's medical bay. The head medic, a no-nonsense doctor from Titan's moons, worked with a team of 6 for 3 hours. The artery hadn't fully ruptured, but it had to be sutured. Jack lost a lot of blood. They repaired the torn muscle and placed him on a limb rest. No weight bearing for 6 weeks minimum. When he woke up, groggy and pale, the warlord was seated beside his bed. "You are not dead. Feel like I was hit by a bus. I have studied buses. They are smaller." Jack let out a breath that almost resembled a laugh. "Good to know." The warlord's gaze lingered on the IV drip and the external brace clamped around Jack's thigh. "The one who sent the assassin will die." "Great. Can you wait until I can walk again? I kind of want to see their face." "You will not walk for many days." "Yeah, figured." Jack wasn't moved to rehab until 4 days later. He was still pale, relying on supplemental oxygen for a few days due to the blood loss. He spent his time issuing orders from bed, barking corrections at anyone who dared present him with sloppy intel. The nurses hated him. The warlord visited daily. "Where do you keep coming?" Jack asked once, groggy from painkillers. "To listen. Not exactly offering military insights in here. You curse at the enemy on medical records. It has strategic value." By the 3rd week, Jack had regained enough strength to sit upright for long periods. A junior medic helped him start gentle stretches. The pain was sharp, but manageable. He didn't complain much, only when the warlord insisted he attend meetings virtually. "This is nonsense," Jack grunted, trying to find a sitting position that didn't feel like being stabbed. "You've got a war to run, not a wounded bartender to babysit." "You are no longer a bartender, and I do not babysit." "You kinda do." The warlord paused. "I kill those who defy me." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You threatened the chief medical officer?" "She refused to allow you into tactical review. I persuaded her. She has 5 degrees in xenomedicine. She now also has flowers." Jack stared. "You sent flowers?" "They were sharp and poisonous. She liked them." He couldn't help it. He laughed. Then winced. Laughing pulled at his leg. By the time he was cleared to put weight on the limb again, 6.5 weeks post-op, Jack had only missed 1 major campaign. He returned to the strategy deck using a hover assist walker, muttering curses the whole way. The warlord met him at the door, said nothing, just nodded once in approval. "Still think I'm fragile?" "Yes, but necessary. Thanks, I think." It didn't take long for word of the assassination attempt to spread. Across the fleet, soldiers and officers began treating Jack with a new kind of reverence. Not fear, not awe. Something weirder. Respect. He was fragile, yes, human, bone and blood and curses, but he'd taken a blade to the thigh and returned to work within 2 months. He still limped a little, but his voice hadn't lost its edge. And when the warlord declared the next planetary campaign would involve negotiations instead of bombardment, it was Jack's plan that led it. He accompanied the warlord to the talks on a neutral orbital station, legs still bandaged, cane in hand. He faced 3 alien governors and said, "Let's skip the speeches. You want peace, we want trade. You get protection, we get resources. Nobody dies. Deal?" They agreed in under 20 minutes. Back on the dreadnought, the warlord stood at the observation deck beside Jack. Stars glittered beyond the glass. "You changed the way I conquer," the warlord said quietly. Jack sipped his tea, too hot, always too hot, and said, "Maybe you didn't need to conquer. I was built for it. Then repurpose." The warlord was silent a long time. "Would you advise me on other matters?" "Like what?" "Succession, diplomacy, perhaps governance." Jack blinked. "You thinking of retiring?" "Not yet, but one who fears cannot rule. One who listens might." Jack looked at him. "You serious?" "I have hospitals. I can give you a department." Jack snorted. "You want me running alien social policy with a leg that still clicks when I stand up too fast?" "Yes." Jack thought about it. The bar, the burn, felt like another life. His muscles still ached, and he was nowhere near his full strength. He'd be doing physical therapy for months. But his brain? That was working just fine. "You're gonna regret this." "I doubt it." Jack nodded slowly. "All right then, let's see what governance looks like." By the 6th month, Jack had a staff. He didn't ask for one, they just started showing up. A nervous logistics officer with a background in xenocultural anthropology became his interpreter for awkward treaty meetings. A former border systems negotiator helped him draft legislation for the newly acquired systems. And someone from engineering showed up every other day with ergonomic adjustments to his cane, which Jack kept breaking against furniture. The warlord, for his part, gave Jack his own office. It was massive, windowless, and shaped like a gun barrel. Jack moved in a second-hand couch and a battered coffee machine, then banned formal uniforms unless there was blood involved. He worked longer hours now. Strategy was still part of it, but his focus had shifted to diplomacy, infrastructure, and, to his great dismay, tax policy. The warlord had turned over the management of 3 systems, including their civil operations and interplanetary communication grids, with nothing more than a curt, "make it run." Jack did. The 3 systems were a mess. One was still recovering from orbital shelling the warlord hadn't sanctioned, but hadn't stopped either. One was halfway through a rebellion being managed by an ex-general who didn't know what food rations meant. And the third had no functioning government at all, just a network of smugglers who had declared themselves provisional administrators. Jack started by sending in food, then engineers, then advisors who understood that if a population was literate and housed, they were a lot less likely to throw grenades at supply trucks. "You are building stability," the warlord said during one of their evening debriefs. "I'm buying you peace. It's more expensive than war, but it lasts longer." "You do not approve of my past?" "I don't approve of anyone's past if it's written in blood, but I do think you're trying to write something different now." The warlord nodded once. "You still limp." Jack sighed. "Physical therapy isn't magic. That blade cut deep. Muscles take months to retrain, nerves too. Painful? On bad days, yeah. I can install you with cybernetics. I like my leg, thanks, it still mostly works. Your loyalty to flawed flesh is amusing. I'm not loyal. I'm stubborn." Later that week, Jack received a call from the border. A strike team had gone rogue. They'd destroyed a civilian relay outpost in retaliation for a smuggling raid. 17 civilians were dead. Jack personally ordered their commander detained, which triggered outrage across 3 military branches. You arrested a decorated officer, one admiral barked during a heated council. He murdered unarmed civilians. They were suspects. They were farmers. And now they're corpses. Do you speak for the military? Jack turned, looked directly at the warlord seated behind the council. The warlord said, "He speaks for me." The chamber went silent. Jupiter's empty space cluttered. Jack leaned on his cane, exhaling slowly. "Then, let's talk about consequences." By month 8, Jack was limping less and shouting more. His leg could support his weight now, though stairs still made him grit his teeth. He did rehab exercises every morning, not because he enjoyed them, but because he hated weakness more. That month he was summoned to an emergency summit. The Nolar Combine, a formerly neutral alliance, accused the warlord's forces of violating orbital space and threatened to dissolve all peace treaties unless reparations were paid. Jack reviewed the footage. It was bad. A patrol cruiser, during a training drill, had drifted into protected airspace and scared half the Combine's satellites into shutdown mode. The Warlord's Council argued against any form of apology. Jack stood, jaw tight. Pay the fine, send the apology, make it clear it won't happen again. "They insult us," barked one of the old guard generals. "No, they gave you a chance to act like an adult." The warlord's eyes locked with Jack's. "This action does not signal weakness. It signals maturity. You scare enough people. Try surprising them." 3 days later, the apology was sent. Jack worded it himself. Reparations were transferred. Modest, but symbolic. The Nolar Combine responded with a trade proposal. The warlord watched Jack sign it. "You were right. I usually am. You are still blunt. You didn't hire me to be poetic." Then, one morning, Jack collapsed. He had just finished a meeting on housing policy for asteroid belt miners when his vision tilted. His knee buckled, he hit the floor with a sharp cry. When the med team arrived, he was conscious but clammy, heart racing. They ran scans immediately. Internal bleeding was ruled out, blood pressure low. Tests confirmed it, post-traumatic muscle strain with residual nerve inflammation. His leg had been pushed too far, too fast. Recovery regression. "You didn't rest it enough," the chief medic told him flatly. "We warned you. You're off your feet for 2 weeks, minimum." Jack grumbled but obeyed. This time the warlord did not visit silently. "You collapsed in front of the staff? I'm aware. They fear for your life. I'm not dying, just healing again. You are not allowed to die." That's sweet, morbid but sweet. The warlord stared at the bioscanners. "You need a deputy. I need stronger legs. I will assign you both." A week later, Jack met his new deputy, a young analyst from a border moon who had filed 15 tactical reports Jack hadn't even noticed. She was smart, fast-talking, and unimpressed by rank. Jack liked her immediately. "Think you can run meetings while I yell at the ceiling?" "Only if I get your office. Don't push it." The rest of the recovery was slow. Pain management helped, as did the medbay's thermal muscle therapy. But Jack still woke up some nights with leg cramps sharp enough to make him sweat. He never called the med team. He just sat on the edge of his bed and waited it out. The warlord visited again. "This role has damaged you. I was damaged before you hired me. You stay." "Yeah, wait." Jack looked at him. "Because I get to fix things. Because I've seen what happens when power goes unchecked. And because for some reason you actually listen." "I do." "Then we're not done." The warlord nodded. "When you are well, I wish to show you something." Jack tilted his head. "What?" "The world we built. One not taken by war, but shaped by your voice." Jack leaned back. "Sounds exhausting." "It is." He smiled faintly. "Then I'm in." The shuttle drifted down through purple clouds, its hull humming with atmosphere friction. Jack sat in the co-pilot's chair, one hand resting on his cane, the other wrapped around a steaming cup of something that claimed to be tea. His leg ached in a familiar, dull way, a reminder, not a limitation. He could walk without the cane now, but he hadn't stopped using it. It reminded people and himself that he'd earned it. The warlord stood silently behind him, armor deactivated, wearing a simple dark cloak. He rarely removed his helm in public, but this trip wasn't public, it was personal. They were approaching Talanis, a terraformed moon in the outer corridor. It had once been a mining hub, stripped bare and left to decay. Now it shimmered with grids of green and silver, vertical farms, solar converters, atmospheric processing towers. Schools, hospitals, houses. Civilization, not conquest. Jack's lips twisted in a faint smirk as the shuttle began its descent. You said it was a project? It was, the warlord said. Now it is a legacy. The landing platform buzzed with quiet activity. Engineers unloading solar tiles, children in uniforms moving between education domes, locals guiding new arrivals through language hubs. There were no banners, no statues, no loud proclamations of rule. Just order, quiet, functioning order. A woman approached, tablet in hand, headset blinking. She wore civilian garb with a patch that read Talanis Coordination Bureau. "Welcome back, Commander," she said with a respectful nod. Then she turned to Jack. "Advisor Rivers, we've kept your schedule light. There's a summit in 2 hours, but the first tour is yours." Jack stepped out onto the landing pad slowly. His leg adjusted to the gravity shift with a minor complaint. He ignored it. They walked the length of the garden sector. Crops grew in quiet rows. A child waved. Jack waved back, awkwardly. "You did this," the warlord said. Jack glanced around. "No, you did. You just used my voice as a compass. You rebuilt what I broke. The reorganized. There's a difference." "You healed them?" "I gave them room to heal themselves." The warlord didn't respond, but Jack didn't need him to. Later, during the summit, Jack sat at a simple desk. Leaders from 3 colonies and a handful of satellite towns spoke, mostly logistics, some disputes. Jack mediated one resource disagreement with a shrug and a promise to cross-train engineers on both sides. At the end, one of the governors stood. "I fought in the first wave against your fleets," she said. "I lost friends. I hated your name." She looked at Jack. "You changed the nature of that name." Jack said nothing at first. Then, "I just gave him bad advice until it sounded good." The room chuckled, cautiously. Jack didn't smile. He'd listened, he said. That's what matters. After the summit, he sat on a bench overlooking one of the reservoirs. The water glimmered beneath distant rings, the sky dappled with cloud and starlight. The warlord sat beside him, silent for a long while. "You are no longer just my advisor," the warlord finally said. Jack gave him a side eye. "What now, Minister of Culture?" "Director of Development." Jack snorted. "You're promoting me. You earned it." He shook his head, staring out at the artificial lake. "I was a bartender. I used to hang out hangovers for a living. Now you hand out peace." Jack let that hang there a moment. "Will they accept it?" he asked. "This empire that isn't an empire?" The warlord's tone was low. "They already have. They just don't trust it yet." "And you?" "I trust you." Jack nodded slowly. The wind shifted, brushing across the water, and somewhere far off he could hear a dog barking. Someone had imported earth dogs. That made him smile, just a little. He would stay. Not because he liked politics, he still hated that, or because he needed purpose. He'd found that already. He would stay because this strange, impossible machine of worlds was learning how to work differently, and for reasons he still didn't fully understand, they listened to him. Not because he shouted, not because he conquered, because he told the truth. He leaned back on the bench, resting both hands on the curve of his cane. The stars above Talanis weren't Earth stars, but they sparkled just the same. "Guess this place could use a few more bartenders," he said. Rebuilding does require alcohol, the warlord replied. Jack